Welcome to the Free Play Arcade podcast. I am Chris Delp, community liaison. I am being joined of Free Play Arcade, by the way. I am being joined by CEO Corey Hayden and COO Richard Trick Kilgus.
Nice, close, pretty good.
Not at all.
Oh, sorry. Siri told me. It's what I know. Anyway, we are here, brought to you once again by my freshly brewed bottle of Just Water. There's nothing funky happening with this Just Water, but I am enjoying it and it is keeping me awake.
Sounds good. So yeah, I mean, Jaden Smith does make excellent water, and I like the points that you are
Subscribing
making
here.
So make sure you click subscribe while you're watching this or listening to this, wherever you might be watching and or listening to it. We're gonna clean up some more mailbag questions today. So it's kind of interesting because we've been we make a lot of cool content. I think we have Game of the Weeks, we've got these walkthroughs and stuff. But ever since we started doing the auction videos and the arcade one-up videos, we have been hit with quite a bit more interest in our YouTube channel, which is cool. We generally use these podcasts as like a way to kind of decompress and really it's like if we were able to do our debriefings in like this long drawn out way, it's what we put on the podcast, and it's really nice so that it helps us kind of fully understand like what we've been doing, the events, all of that stuff I really like. But we have a lot more questions coming in, and I thought it would be a good chance to knock some of them out. One of the questions that came in recently, which I thought was pretty interesting, was what is your favorite game at Free Play that's no longer available at Free Play, that went off the floor for one reason or another? Richard, I think, had one, so we'll start with Richard.
All right, Night Driver.
Oh yeah, so that was really cool. So we have an Atari Night Driver in the collection. It's still in the collection, and it is such a cool game. Old black and white Atari game, and I don't even remember exactly why we took it off the floor, but it was just kind of it was relatively reliable. It was relatively popular.
It was. The first gear wasn't working properly. We need to fix that still. But despite that, it played great. It was barely noticeable unless you were someone like me. Right.
Well, yeah, because first gear isn't actually all that valuable in the game. I mean, it's valuable if you're going for the ultimate perfect high score.
Right.
But if you're just trying to have a fun game, you can start in second gear and really enjoy
once
it.
you start, you never get back down to first gear again if you don't crash. So.
Well, and of course, my favorite game mode on Night Driver is to throw it in the fourth, hit the gas, and hold on as long as you can, and not let go of the gas. So I thought that was a really, really fun game. And if we had Night Driver, we should have done like that on every single one of our brewery events or anything. It's really cool because it's just how high of a score can you get in this first minute or so until you crash, or if you crash, I guess.
Well, I love it just because it maxes out the game. You've got 90 seconds to start, and you can be granted an additional 90 seconds. So finishing that game out with under 3 minutes every time you play it, always quick, easy, and really fun.
Yeah, they really maximize the tech there with the black and white monitor, but the way they use the different pillars and everything, and the car graphic is just static. Yet it felt right. It drove really, really right. That's just it's a wonderful game, and I know we took it off the floor because we have all these different arcade concepts that we've been kind of brainstorming and trying to figure out a way, because I think that game would work better on like single coin play. And we also have a very difficult rotation, and we have to figure out games that are going to rotate off. And for better or worse, Night Driver was not the most played, but the people who did play it, I think, just loved it. So we still own it. We need to put it out at some point. Gosh,
we should just put it back here, and I'll play it during podcasts. Door.
We should bring it to every brewery event. I'm serious. I love that game mode. It's fast. It's one of the best. All right. That was Atari Night Driver. Chris.
I still think I can break that record. I got close on the 24-hour.
Kangaroo.
Oh, wow.
No, just kidding. No.
Alvin G.
No need to qualify this answer. It's pole position.
Yeah. Pole position is such a good driver. And that's another one that actually I think just works better on coin play.
Oh, yeah, because it stays on that one screen when you have the credit, and then it has the infinite loop of...
Yeah, and there've been a couple different hacks that have been tried to fix free play, and I mean we were technically using one of them, but if it has a credit, it'll just keep starting games. Yep. And so what you'd have is players walk up to it while it's just sitting there at the starting line. They'll hit the gas, but they've already lost like half their time. And
why am I going so slow? I don't understand the concept of shifting.
Yeah, I mean
pole position. That's my favorite.
It's one of the best games, and we had it out forever. We moved it to Arlington because just so that we could keep it out because it was due for rotation. And yeah, it's an all-time classic that's one of the ones that hasn't fit the model as well as it should have.
I remember I inadvertently saved that game for a month or two because as it was rotating off. Now, I never intended to like influence the game lineup, but as it was rotating off, I made pole position month for the arcade monthly challenge before I worked there. So I had the graphic, I had it. So it was based on the 1984, I believe, F1 series car. So I went and found the 1984 F1 series champion, and then photoshopped his specific car into the hastily photoshopped winner's certificate for that one. So yeah, good times. Doug Galt won that after he had cashed in on mine, his, and Keith Carlson's free drink for it was the Summer Olympics track and field.
Oh, nice
promo. So we all won a drink. We all gave it to Doug Galt. And then after that, he breaks the high score that still stands on pole position.
Nice.
Well, I remember we had a pretty fun event on one of the Gameramas. We did just one of the hours was just a pole position, maybe even qualifying round challenge or something. And it was just
qualify, qualify for the race.
It really shines when you're able to control the gameplay, which the thing is a quarter does the best. We'll have to look at that. We'll have to get that back out. I mean, pole position belongs in a classic arcade. It's just difficult. So mine is, I think, the newest game we had when we launched Free Play Richardson. Does anyone know?
Is it Outrun 2?
Yeah, Outrun 2. I think Outrun 2 is one of my favorite driving games of all time.
It was either that or Virtua Fighter 3, which I always wanted to try.
I think it was 4 that we had.
4 was 4.
Okay. Yeah. So 4 was out there as well. I always wanted to try it. Thought, I'm going to get to it, and I never did.
I actually kind of fell in love with that game slowly as I played it. Virtua Fighter 4 was my favorite for a while. But yeah, Outrun 2, I think, is just an amazing arcade driver.
Well, we've just put hundreds of hours into playing that game, and I mean, late nights working, we'd always just hop on and do quick little races while we're fixing arcade games before free play was even a thing.
Yeah, and it's I love the game. Unfortunately, that's another game that wasn't particularly well made in terms of like the hardware they chose. The Chihiro motherboards just suck.
Is it all modern games? Are they all?
Yeah, I mean,
played with this. I suspect so.
The Chihiro stuff was just, I mean, there's a decent amount of it and there's all sorts of tweaks, but to deliver that like consistent performance is so hard out of them. Like, for example, in support of our Outrun 2, I bought something like 3 or 4 more parts Outrun 2s that came to us completely destroyed just for parts, and we just kept replacing parts. And then I realized that it just was unsustainable. And I mean, when I had it at the back of my law firm, which is where it actually started, and we could play it every once in a while or just throw it on and play it for a couple hours even, no big deal, worked great. But man, you give it to the public for 10 plus hours a day and you get thousands and thousands of people playing it. It just could not survive. And we eventually, and Outrun 2 is one of those games where people take pretty seriously, which they should because it's an awesome game. But there's so many parts that get abused. So that one has never made it back out. I think it actually kind of works still. We just can't support it.
Not consistently.
Yeah. So
I got a weird side question for my arcade proprietor friends. So modern arcade games are in love with crappy LCD monitors. My question is, in 20 years, when it's free play terrible arcade games, I guess would be the title of it.
Right.
What happens to those? Like do those games even survive without their crappy LCD monitors? Because like at some point, technology is going to replace them with either, I'm assuming, something beyond LCD monitors, and you know, CRTs were never equaled in their refresh rate. Like the what CRTs do well, LCDs and other things can't duplicate. What LCDs do well is still to be determined. So when they're out of date, when they're out of production and in the garbage heap where they belong, what happens to those games?
Well, I think one of the things is we're seeing LCD and LED monitors LCD LED monitors come a long way. And I think the monitors are probably 5 to 10 years out from being really good. But you're seeing modern arcade games use them in a way that one is they're designed for those monitors. So
right,
that's
which is
better.
sort of what I'm getting at.
There was a period of from I guess probably 2005 when they really started using LCDs to probably 2015 where they just were bad. But the nice thing is, since they were programmed for the bad LCDs, you can drop these newer LCDs in.
They will still function
adequately. And not only adequately, they're a little bit better.
I'm wondering what this means whenever would they just move on to the next thing, whatever the next thing is.
Well, everyone talks about blacks, right? The true blacks on the monitors, and how forever they've been striving to try to make LCDs better, and they're clearly getting better, but they're still so far away. And not to mention rounded pixels, all that stuff where it was comparing CRTs. But I think one of the interesting things is we always make fun of people who say they've upgraded their Donkey Kong with an LCD. God. I think that there's going to be a period of time where like a 2008 arcade game is actually upgraded with a better LCD.
Right.
It actually is better. You get a better gameplay experience. So that's kind of cool. And I think we're already getting kind of close to the point that the games that were programmed for like VGA style inputs, we're getting close to where you could put a good LCD in them. For example, Gauntlet Dark Legacy. I think the LCD LED display technology is coming close enough that pretty soon I think you could put one of those in there and it wouldn't dramatically decrease because that's already a native VGA game.
Also, as a game player, you don't care so much about the lag in that game because that game exists outside of Twitch movement.
Input delay and all of that stuff wouldn't matter as much. So I think there will be games like that. And we've seen some racers LCD with modern LCDs that are a little bit better. But I want to make sure that whenever I say anything nice about LCDs, I'm prefacing that by saying I'm talking about putting a modern, cutting edge $2,000 to $3,000 LCD into an arcade game that might be worth $400, and that I think is an upgrade. And you might be able to upgrade it at that arcade that way. So most people aren't doing that. Most people are taking the cheapest possible monitor without any concern as to input latency, the black levels, the various different things. And I do just generally, I mean,
I'm just curious because I thinking about it, I suspect this entire generation, which maybe they need to go away, but the games we're seeing now, they might not. Well, might not be there for the 20-year anniversary.
I don't think that I'm not sure of any modern arcade game that people would consider like a classic.
I'm not. I can't think of any of them that I would want to play.
I'll say that I think Golden Tee and
Golden Tee's got an interesting place.
Big Buck. Those both, we did those for those bar game month, and I think that they both have enough fans and they did enough for arcades that those will be considered at least in the arcade culture
era
forever.
Specific classics. Yeah.
But I can't. I'm trying to think of a good. I mean, that besides the Japanese releases,
right.
There's cool Japanese rhythm games. For example, the Crossbeats Rev that we had over at Free Play Denton for that 1 3-hour period.
But even they are moving to more prestige style games. So big. I don't know what you call them, like the giant guns and the swinging apparatuses that are clearly one of a kind and cannot be replicated and will be long gone.
You can kind of see their logic there, which is to try to make something that you can't possibly experience at home.
Right.
I just want the train simulators.
Well,
it's pretty cool.
It's
a room. So it's like a whole room.
Right.
Yeah.
Japan has a lot of cool stuff like that, but I also think Japan has done a pretty good job. Like, Japan is very, very much the cream rises and then stays at their arcades.
It has to. They have to perform to stay, to just justify their existence in that amount of space.
Right.
They can't possibly have a free play arcade there because they can't possibly have that many dedicated arcade cabinets.
Well, we've said things about Round 1 before. I don't know if they've all been good or bad or what. But I think about how Round 1 is operated by a bunch of people who love, Japanese.
Well, there's a Round 1 in Tokyo.
But then I think about how they must think about how much space they have at like Grapevine Mills Mall, and that's why they have like the 72-inch or even 120-inch Lost World arcade games and stuff, because they're just like, we have so much space. We're in Texas. We can just put games everywhere. Games. It's just really interesting because that's just so big and so useless.
Well, I remember the late 90s, early 2000s going to GameWorks in Grapevine, at Grapevine Mills Mall. And there are games there that I am 100% sure I will never play again.
Yeah.
The 4-story tall games. And I mean, they were excess for the late 90s before the .com bust.
Well, and we're having a lot of people asking for, or starting to ask for, some of these early 2000s games, and I can't think of any offhand that were kind of bad. But I think it's just raw nostalgia that's driving some of it, and some of that's really hard for me because I love nostalgia and I think it's really important. But I also take game curation really, really seriously. And game curation doesn't even mean you can't possibly have a bad game out. I mean, we had Weird Games Month and stuff like that. If it fits in the theme properly, and what you also see is every single game that's ever been made probably has a fan. Even if it's bad, and I guess that's the thing.
People still defend Dr. Mario to me.
Well, yeah, and it's really interesting because we all have our own experiences. And like, I mean, for example, I was just looking at these pinball rankings, and Hollywood Heat is ranked 325th. It's one of the worst of all time. And backdrop. We now kind of, I think it's pretty obvious that the Backglass by itself dragged that probably 200 rankings too low. And we've rethemed it, and everyone's having a great time with it. And so I was just looking at Teed Off, for example, which I think is one of the easiest and best introductory pinballs that exists. But in the lexicon of pinball, and like the serious pinball players, they don't take it seriously at all. They put it in the same category as like those other pinballs, such as like Super Mario Brothers, which I think all arcades should have these introductory basic pinballs that you can walk up. Everyone understands pretty quickly. It has some fun functions. That's it. It's not the pinball that's designed to last like 300 hours a game, and you can just live on that pinball while you're playing it. It's a game that's simple, easy to understand, and but no, when I look at the modern arcade world, I can't find very much good, especially American arcades. I can't find very much good, and I don't know what to do with that.
It's not to say that there aren't some things that are fun or novel, but they don't really have the same kind of staying power.
I haven't seen it. I haven't seen a fun American-made arcade game.
I'm trying to think.
I can't think of how long. Like you said, the Japanese ones are fun. The rhythm games, I'm seeing some interesting stuff. Yeah, I can't think of one good thing to say. I'm sorry.
I had fun, and I was probably super drunk at the time, but I was playing Big Buck Zombies or something, and
nice.
Apparently there's like zombies in Big. I don't actually know. I could have been too drunk to even know if this is true. But
all right, Corey Fever dreams about arcade games.
I remember that was fun, but not good, just fun. But it's really, really bad out there.
It's rough. Okay, it's rough. So they released like a Mortal Kombat like card battle game or something.
Yeah,
nice.
Like the Injustice card battle as an arcade.
Come on, y'all don't want to play like Flappy Bird, the arcade game?
Right. Well, and what's really funny is when I was at a modern arcade not too long ago, I ended up finding Flappy Bird to be like the best game there. I was like, because it was fair.
Right.
It didn't, because that's one of the things I really hate about modern arcade games, and it will crush them if we ever try to put it into a free play, is that they are skill balanced just to extract the exact amount of money they want out of you. Whereas in the 80s, they were skill balanced by being really, really hard. So they were going to get money. But if you perfected, if you got good at the game, all of a sudden you can play it much longer and you get a great value. And it was based on that. But nowadays, it's like, it's so pay to win that it makes Gauntlet look like, I don't even know, something much less pay to win.
Well, it's like we had that stacker game back in the back of the law firm, and we were like, okay, cool. So we played it a bunch, and we got really good at playing stacker, so that every time we could win prizes, mini prizes, because it was rigged so that you could only win the big prizes every once in a while. But
that was really, I was at a, what was it? Some pizzeria that had a stacker in the back, and I, blaze through it until the very last one, and then every single time I lost the last one, I was like, oh right, it's just rigged. So
always go for that.
Just take your first prize and move on.
First prize.
Yeah.
But I think that there are certain games like what was that physical game that has the flashing lights, like Speed of Light or something?
Oh, yeah,
it's like a speed race game.
Yeah.
I think it's novel, but do I think that kind of, or that game is going to hold up in the arcade scene or like in arcade history? Absolutely not.
Well, yeah, it wasn't really a video arcade, but yeah, I know which one you're talking about, where you just press the lights as they flash and you can go 1v1. It's pretty cool.
It's kind of like a challenge game. And, I think that there are a lot of games that fit that kind of a type. They're novel, but I don't really think that they directly contribute to the history of arcades as we know it. I think that they're going to all just fall by the wayside.
I actually was just going to check, and yeah, there are questions. So this has kind of been a segue, guys, but we do have plenty of questions like that are our opinions on modern stuff, and we've shared plenty of that before. And I rack my brain trying to find a good one in my head, and I can't. I mean, pinball. Pinball has had a good run.
I've got two for you because I just thought of it. No, I'm thinking about it. First one I didn't count because I wasn't even thinking of it as a modern game. It's Sky Cursor. Love it.
Yeah.
The second one I've seen many people enjoy, and it's coming to free play Arlington, which is
Killer Queen. Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah, the independent arcade scene is doing their best. They're trying really, really hard to get it going. I mean, they're making good games.
I could see both of those games like having a place in the future.
Well, in Sky Cursor, and they'd probably agree with me, Sky Cursor, I feel like in many ways was hindered by being an American release. Because I know that they've been getting decent support now in Europe and Asia. But like, I feel like if this was released by a major publisher in Japan, it could have become. It honestly might be like one of those hit games that takes over and like really is really into it.
It's so amazingly authentically retro.
Right.
It's really a testament to the creators of that game.
So yeah, there have been a lot of people working on indie arcade games and everything. And let me take this as a quick segue to talk about, and I've probably talked about this in the podcast before, but I absolutely detest the way some of the modern PC games are being released as arcade games. I'm not saying I think that can be done properly, but I found, so for example, what was Cuphead?
Oh yes.
Was that released? Was that officially released?
No, it
just
wasn't.
ported.
It was a modern
No,
conversion.
I hate
It was
that stuff.
basically a custom build with a widescreen monitor and arcade setup controls, which anyone who's ever played Cuphead knows that an arcade control scheme is absolutely terrible for that game.
It's made for a console.
Yeah, so the guy,
It's the same. It's the same as going backwards and making
right.
Street Fighter Super Turbo for your control pad or your hitbox. Like it's an arcade machine, CRT and all that thing. So the reverse is true. Like it's a console game is best enjoyed on a console.
Well, and the guy that was making these, they looked really cool.
Oh, they were very cool.
The artwork in Cuphead looks
very cool.
amazing.
They just played like crap. They were just terrible to it. They were terrible experiences and everything like that. So we've got a quick alert. We've got a surprise.
My tile is going off.
Call Richard Tragilgas.
But yeah, I've seen a few other times.
Richard Truck Gale.
Y'all are gonna have to work on y'all's phone skills. But no, I really do think, and I see it. I worry that it's gonna happen more. That these kind of fake arcade releases without consideration of like control schemes and stuff will continue, because there was one at Texas Pinball Festival, a Cuphead conversion, and I played it, and I actually hadn't played very much Cuphead until that point, and it totally turned me off on Cuphead. And now I've since played it, and I like it. It was a great game, awesome game, really cool, really awesome.
Fantastic.
But it really affected me, and it was mainly the control scheme, and then they had some overlays and stuff that made you could not really see everything. And but one of the things I really care about is that every game is presented in the way that it's best to play the game. And most of the time, it's not always this way, but most of the time that's how it was originally made. And so like I don't know,
small exceptions to things like Miss Pac-Man.
Right.
So Miss Pac. Well, okay.
Speed Chip.
Speed Chip.
Yeah.
But
it was not original, but it is the accepted method of play.
I think what we're seeing here is like a real affinity and nostalgia for classic arcade games just being perverted, and like we want arcades so badly that we're dragging them into console games that are made to be console games, console fighting games that they're trying to like spruce back up into something like a modified Big Blue or something like that. And it just like, those games were made for console with input lag and all the stuff that's built into a PS4.
Right.
It's probably just best served as they do it at fighting game majors with head-to-head, the gaming LCDs.
Yeah, no, it really is.
In a presentation that looks,
I'm trying to think.
clean, but
There was a Killer Instinct Infinite at TPF in a arcade. I actually thought it was a pretty decent job. But I guess that's the thing, though. It takes it of probably the 30 or 40 games that I've seen like that. That's the only one that's in my head sticks out as being good. Except for, of course, the Red Bull cab. That was a pretty good idea. Now, I don't think that putting Street Fighter 5 in that is the ideal, but I do think games like Skullgirls are really, really cool in that exact thing. And I think like fighting games are one thing, and getting them in. Well, no. So, like, I mean, the console versions of these fighting games, though, are almost always the wrong thing to try to shove into an arcade. And I think Chris is totally right there because, like, we know now because we have a USF4 that we're, 2 or 3 that we're working on getting out.
can I tell you a horror story?
What's that?
There was an arcade release of Tekken 7. It's a classic arcade game. It's an arcade game. It's there.
Right.
Right? It came out. It's in Japan. I played it.
Yeah.
They released a console version of that. Now, they didn't really release... Was it not released in the States? Was it not widely released?
Well,
Tekken 7?
Tekken 7 on the arcade was not released in the United States.
Okay, but it was released in Japan. I've played it.
Yeah, and you can get it in Australia. Australia was the biggest import market, so they made it
Very close
in English
to
version.
Japan.
And Australia ended up getting quite a few of them.
Well, I've seen an arcade version here in the States imported over.
Yeah.
When it came out on console, I saw people hacking arcade cabinets, stuffing consoles into arcades. Now, that is not the actual Tekken 7. That's an arcade, a console stuffed into an arcade. It's
well, and if you know anything about the actual arcade releases, and you can kind of understand why they're not doing as many arcade releases because the input output, the I/O stuff on these arcade releases is extremely more expensive than the consoles. Like a console that might cost $350 or $400 will have the arcade will have that much just in the input output, the fast I/O, the JVS boards, whatever kind of connections it's using. And there's all sorts of cool modern stuff that's coming out. But that they're spending that much just on those control boards when it comes to an arcade to minimize input lag, to make sure that, basically you have commercial level performance out of these games. So yeah, it's better to just play like that game in that presentation, right?
Not stuff it into an arcade. Just play it on the console,
right? No,
like if you told me, hey, I want to bring a console fighting game to the arcade, that's kind of cool. Like we would do it in the console form,
right? Well, and we've talked about that in the past about how I
think we've had them on the floor when we had Vice City recently.
Yeah. We did SF5 during the Spring Series. We just brought a PS4 out with 2 fight sticks.
Exactly. And as it was meant to be played.
Right. And I mean, the biggest danger I think happens in there is when you are making people not understand that there's a console inside. That when for example you're shoving Street Fighter 5 on a Vuelix and basically pretending that it's an arcade.
Are they coming out with an arcade version of it now?
Yeah, something like that.
I remember they had Arcade Edition. I don't know. I don't follow. I know many of my contemporaries hate the game, so I don't have time for it.
Yeah, so Street Fighter 5 has received an official arcade announcement that they're going to release it as an arcade. I assume just on a Vuelix. Maybe Capcom will make some more some more kits for Vuelixes and stuff. But and I mean, it gets really silly, and there's obviously little fine lines here, but one of the biggest concerns that I have is consumer interpretation. Because, for example, when these arcades were throwing PS4s and Vuelixes, and saying that they had Street Fighter 5 on the arcade, we had people coming to us and say, "Hey, man, when are you going to get like Street Fighter 5?" And I'm like,
"That's not an arcade game.
We're an arcade though." And they're like, "No, I saw it in another arcade." I'm like, "That wasn't the arcade though." And you get a lot of blurred lines too. For example, like with Street Fighter 4,
which is both,
right? Yeah. The USF4 arcade release is something that is very, very specialized, and the console version is different, for better or worse. But the arcade version plays totally different, and is harder to find, harder to source, more expensive, and definitely in terms of inputs, better. Your input delay, they use either fast I/O or JVS, which is 2 different input types. Very, very low latency, very, very nice. then you have arcades that are running Street Fighter 4 console version inside these Vulix cabinets. And it's happening a lot. It's happening more than they would even admit. And then bragging that they've found a Street Fighter 4 arcade, which Street Fighter 4 arcades exist. So it's not like impossible to find. And so in that exact situation, we've had a lot of people get turned off to Street Fighter 4, which is a game we're going to release a free play kind of soon. And so I really hate seeing that because they're just like, it just didn't really catch my attention. And I'm like, wow, why not? And they're like, it just felt a little clunky or something like that. And that's one of those clues. The terminology like clunky is almost always used when it turns out that they're running a fake version of the game, a console version as an arcade, that kind of stuff.
Or we're just talking about Street Fighter 5.
Right. Well, yeah, Street Fighter 5 is just not that great. I hope Capcom gets it back and going because Street Fighter 5, it just cannot be the one that's going to hold for years and years and years, which of course I'm sure has Capcom scrambling and trying to figure out what the heck to do about it. Which, I mean, Street Fighter 4 by all accounts was a pretty good release. There's Third Strike. That was the the Street Fighter 3 release. That was great. So I mean, very few companies have ever had that kind of track record, but to have Street Fighter 5 bombing so much, and I wonder if like in 10 years there's gonna be like this nostalgia wave because of the few people that played it.
I don't know. I don't even know what iteration of Street Fighter 5 is the one you play. Maybe it's one that hasn't come out yet where they perfect it 10 years down the line, but I would just think Street Fighter 6 is where we're going.
Yeah, that's probably true. And something tells me now Street Fighter 5 was supposed to be kind of a throwback Street Fighter already.
Well, and 4 had all the characters. 4 had like you play the characters in similar fashions that you do in Street Fighter 2. A lot of the moves look similar.
But I'm going to go ahead and say a big prediction, Street Fighter 6 is going to look a lot like Super Turbo. Play a lot like Super Turbo because I know Capcom's paying attention. I know they're seeing what's happening, which is when they make a really, really great game, people are going to love it. And the same thing's happening in the Smash Brothers scene, right? So Smash Brothers, they had Melee for so long, and they keep making new ones, and they get a little bit of crowd, but Melee keeps crushing.
Yeah.
And now we've got the new one coming out that, basically the marketing is, this is like the one you like. So trust us, it's going to be good.
Good luck with that, Nintendo.
Right. So, I mean, so I imagine Capcom's going to do something similar here. But yeah, I really, really do hate disguised stuff. And although that said, it makes me nervous about that Red Bull cabinet we have, and we've never figured out how to. We were able to source one. So Red Bull last year, I think, commissioned new arcades to be made, which of course that gets my my blood pressure up. I'm really excited. I'm like, yes, new arcades, and then they stuck Street Fighter 5 in it. Whatever. They didn't work very well. Whatever. They were cool. They were arcades, and they were built really, really well. In terms of like the wood on the cabinets is pretty neat.
Mostly metal, but yeah.
Okay, yeah. I mean, really, really neat. And we've got one, which is exciting because someone in Dallas won one in the raffle that Red Bull did.
Nice.
So we were able to get that one, and I still don't know what to do with it because it's
a PS4 in there, right?
Yeah. It is PS4 with the appropriate zero latency USB encoders and stuff. So they knew kind of what they were doing.
I have a suggestion.
Oh yeah,
there's lots of indie games that came out on these systems. Xbox 360. I spent a ton of my time playing in the live arcade. Indie games that are clearly old school in their formatting. You might find some gems there that no one's ever played before.
Right, that's what we've been trying to figure out is what to do with, because it's basically just an HDMI TV. Ultra low latency gaming monitor and ultra low latency video game inputs.
Yeah, but most of the games in the vein of say Sky Cursor, which really went the extra step that they're made for CRTs and made for the old cabinets themselves. But there's a lot of those indie games that were made very much in homage to the old games. Cuphead was one that you mentioned, but the control scheme is a little that's complex.
That's my biggest concern is fine because it'll be easiest to throw, and I think we're gonna also just mine a lot of the obscure fighters that have come out in the past 2 decades because it's set up. It's got a 6-button control panel with fighting game inputs, Sanwas and stuff. So that's something like that. Eventually, we'll get around to. For right now, it's just a collection piece because it was really important that we got that into the collection because Red Bull made 50. It was a real arcade. They commissioned new arcades to be built, and it's a piece of arcade history. And
they put them out.
Yeah, it's a piece of arcade history that we're gonna hold on to, even if they won't. I'm sure we'll end up with like 20 of them because I can't help myself. All right, so let's keep on moving. I don't remember what the original question on that time was. Did we really build that all off of favorite game no longer on the floor? Did I ask another question?
Did you get to your favorite game on the floor?
Yeah, Outrun 2. Outrun 2.
All driving games,
So
if you remember that long back.
that was interesting. All right, hold on. Let's
We have a tendency to ramble.
right, for sure. All right. So, one of the questions we have is our favorite food item on the menu. We've got eater.com has said a lot of nice things about our food menu, nominated us for all sorts of cool stuff. We've received quite a bit of recognition for taking arcade food and making it good. It's kind of that's what some people say. Some people call it generic bar food, which to me is crazy. But I guess I'll give a quick background for those that are listening that aren't familiar. We have at our Arlington and our Richardson location, we have full kitchens. And we make really, really awesome fresh appetizers, press sandwiches, and pizzas. And also, I mean, the fresh apps also include a tacos appetizer that I have to mention because it's one of our most popular food items. And one of my favorite moments in free play history is someone ordering tacos, or a family orders a bunch of food. They're all sitting down. They're all adults. They're sitting down to eat. One of them takes a bite of their taco. Their eyes go wide. They run, like they set it down. They run up to the counter, and everyone's like, whoa, 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 what's going on? And you can see like the employee's getting really nervous because this guy's just sprinting up to the counter right after he took a bite of the food. He's chewing up there. Like one of the family members runs up and they're like, what's going on? And he's like, I have to order more tacos. Because the first bite was so delicious, he knew he wanted a whole nother order.
I would say they're delicious enough that if a fan was running a tournament series, he would hold them on Tuesdays just so that he would get discount tacos during the group meeting.
No, and those are really, really amazing. And it's, I mean, like the great thing about those tacos is I would hold them against just about any street tacos out there, and I would say that they're up there. Not just ignore the fact that they're coming out of an arcade. They are really, really amazing. And the reason they're so amazing is I can totally get this away. That's 12 hours slow roasted on bone pork. That's then flashed on the grill with pico and all sorts of delicious seasonings and flavors. Covered with a little bit of cheese. Boom. That's all that really matters, and it's delicious. Favorite item on the free play food menu.
Let's go Richard first because I'm gonna.
Can I just say crostinis because I love our crostinis so no.
They are OP.
It's definitely not a meal, but no, our fruit and cheese plate that has those, they are delicious, and I don't know.
It's amazing what fresh bread, garlic, and butter will do.
I know, right? No, I was actually going to say mini tacos, but now I'm going to change that because we've covered
we
that
just
pretty
talked
well.
about them.
Oh gosh, it's really simple, and it may not be for everyone, but our avocado press is amazing.
Which you can actually, there's a video of Rizwan talking about it back from the last spring series, who he's on the camera, he takes a bite and you can just see him being like, whoa, 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 guys. And they're like talking about Street Fighter and they're all having, he's like, no, I got to talk about this. Hold on. This is delicious. And he calls it avocado toast, which is very coastal of him. Nice. But
that was, we were having him commentate for the spring series at that point, and he was like, I went to him, I'm like, can you go on now? And he's like, I need to eat. And so I dragged him to the kitchen and I was like, get him whatever he wants right now. So they got him that, and that's why he had the toast that he was presenting to the camera.
No, it was the avocado was great.
Well,
I guess
what I will say is that I liked avocados before we opened free play, but I got obsessed with avocados and eating that avocado pressed sandwich. The chipotle mayo that's on it, like the cheese, it is just flavorful in all the right ways. It's got that little hint of spice, crispy bread. I mean, it's just, it makes a meal for me. And when I'm in a rush, I think it's absolutely delicious.
Yeah, it's probably one of the most balanced of the sandwiches in terms of like just hitting all the flavor profile, savory, perfect. And it's also, not the worst for you.
Well, and it's a little less messy than the tacos, which could be my only complaint about them. Right. Street tacos are not always the easiest to eat.
Right. But yeah, I think that's great. I feel like there's a lot of people that would put the avocado toward the top of the menu because it is just so perfect. And believe we do all the work in house for that. There's not a single thing on that. It comes like prepackaged or anything like that. And very little in our kitchen does. And
none of our food really comes prepackaged or pre-cooked or pre-any.
Well, that was the big change, I think, in terms of figuring out our menu was coming back with me coming from food service, figuring out something that we could both be relatively fast getting out of the kitchen that still was awesome, and also kind of went along with our theme, that was where those pressed sandwiches came from. And I'm so happy we didn't get like a flat top to make burgers or anything. I feel like I'm totally in love with pressed sandwiches now, and I think I always will be. As like a good late night bar type food, but just awesome.
It's not the standard late night bar food. Like, I don't know, if I go to a bar, I'm gonna expect that they're probably gonna have some sort of like sliders, some sort of like chicken wings, fries, like a lot of fried heavy stuff. And that's what I really like about our menu, is that it's very refreshing. Like, our flatbreads are delicious. So if you're looking for that kind of pizza option, our sandwich is also amazing, and a wide variety of different flavor profiles and tastes. Yeah. And then with our appetizers, I can go get a vegetable plate at Free Play if I want.
Right.
And I don't, aside from getting, celery and carrots, I don't really know about getting spreads of vegetables at bars.
Yeah, no, it's a totally different menu, and I think it performs very well, and I also think that people just really, really dig it. So Chris, we've bought you some time.
As someone who's been to the arcade virtually every day for the past 3 years and still eats the arcade food, I've had everything on the menu. So it's. I didn't want to go first because I have two. My favorite sandwich is the chicken pesto.
Yes,
which I've had a zillion times. And my favorite pizza is the chicken and green chili.
Yeah, the green chili chicken pizza is, so good.
So good.
It's really absurdly good. And I feel like a lot of people on that exact pizza, which is my favorite, by the way. That was the one I was going to go with my favorite food item, which I was like almost certainly going to go with one of our porks because I came up with all that entire. But
the pork that we have is delicious.
Right. Yeah.
That process makes it.
But the green chili chicken pizza is just so good, and I feel like a lot of people like they read it on the menu and they just go past it because it just sounds like kind of a strange pizza, but it is. It's really, really good. Really, lots of chicken, lots of cheese, just really, really good. And then the chili sauce that we use as the sauce on the pizza, it's actually somewhat unlike a lot of the. You don't see that kind of thing in a lot of just pizza places generally, or even the ones that are, trying to offer you lots of different flatbread options. It's relatively unique, and it came out just really, really great.
Well, two special shout outs to dearly departed menu items. The Nutella sandwich that got repurposed for
Originally the Kong.
Donkey Kong.
Yeah, the Kong.
Yeah, so that one. And then Carlos flipping burgers in front of Burger Time. Please give me that one back.
Yeah, no, so that was actually...
I will have the 3-year anniversary of that party just to have that.
Nice.
Well, we have to because we bought this grill and we haven't used it for anything. We got a commercial grill. We got all these commercial stuff.
Yeah.
And I forgot about it a little bit. And then we were going through our storage.
We have a lot of stuff.
Right. And I saw that and I was like, oh, man, because we bought a ton of propane and a commercial outdoor grill just so that we could have a Burger Time party and have burgers there.
Because we're ridiculous.
And so that turned out really, really well. I brought my old hamburger press. I brought my recipe.
I know a guy who can go for the Burger Time world record if we want to construct a Carlos Flips Burgers right next to him event.
Hey, we've got lots of bacon and eggs costumes and different things.
Yeah, we had people walking around as hot dogs. No, I think that should be a once a summer event. I just forgot about it because it was a lot of fun, and we sold a lot of burgers actually too. So
I'm gonna do shout out to old menu item that's no longer with us, the turkey and brie.
I know
that was so good, and we're right at Thanksgiving time, so I always miss that this time of year.
Yeah, so the turkey and brie with the cranberry chutney is what you're talking about.
The cranberry chutney, that's what made that.
So that was maybe one of the menu items that we got that was just a little too high concept, I guess. Because turkey and brie is amazing, and the cranberry it all worked really well together, and it tasted amazing. Getting having brie and dealing with brie on a daily basis wasn't the easiest for our kitchen.
Well, and fresh making the cranberry chutney,
right.
and it didn't really sell very well. Right. So I ate a lot of those before we ultimately decided that it wasn't worth the expense of
Well,
making that stuff fresh every day.
And it's not finalized, but we are probably about a month away from a minor menu revamp. It's more like a refresh. Get us some new items out there. Take away a couple. It's going to be controversial, but I think generally people will be super happy with what we add. And I think so far, I think it's really interesting because food is so polarizing in general, and people, you often...
It's the ultimate subjective subject.
Right,
Everybody
right.
has to eat it. Everybody has their own opinion. There isn't anything that is very clear about anything.
And I actually had a post, and I'm going to do this sometime, and I should have this post done before this video goes live, but I've taken all of the reviews that mention food and thrown them into like one of those little text web thing generators from like 10 years ago where the biggest word is like good and stuff like that, and I'm just gonna post that because I haven't really found out how to market the food very well. It's hard because it is like when you sit there and you make proclamations about your food, that's something that someone that could just for whatever reason not like that food item because they don't like the flavors or whatever could totally rip you apart for, and in their head they're totally right like, and so food is definitely the hardest, and definitely we've learned a lot about figuring out both what people like to eat but what individuals like to eat, and I think most of our regulars have probably all have their own favorite menu item. But I can say that I've had every single thing on the menu, and it is all really, really good. And we get a lot of props on our Cuban, which Cuban and the Texan, both those two sandwiches.
Mm-hmm. Both of them are definitely on the middle stand.
And very, very good. And what I really, really like is when we were opening Denton, I was talking about how it was going to be downtown Miami arcade. There's this guy that's from Miami that eats our Cuban almost every time he comes to Richardson, and I was telling him about it. He was like, I that's so perfect because you can serve the Cuban there, and it's so good, and I was like, oh, there's no kitchen there. But he was like, no, you have to get a kitchen so you can serve he was like, because he actually it's not the most authentic Cuban because it's a uniform arcade menu with uniform bread, but it gets the Cuban flavors really, really perfect, and it's done so well. And
that was the worst thing that happened to that poor guy since that team of ninjas beheaded his entire family in the 80s.
Little callback to our least watched podcast of all time. The 2 hours we spent talking about
2 hours well spent, sir.
Oh yeah, but that's good. That was a good movie. We are really, really proud of the food though still, and I think that it's been a lot of it's been interesting having people complain about us not having burgers, which is mostly gone. Although just yesterday, on a Sunday, I get a notification that says someone's asked a new question about Free Play Arlington, and the very first response was they have generic bar food like sandwiches, and then in parentheses it said burgers, and so I had to go in there, and I was just like, so hey, this is what we have, blah blah blah. It's all really good. We're really excited to have you and everything, and then burgers ended up being mentioned like 3 more times and people responding, and so somehow people have internalized that we have burgers despite just we have sandwiches, we have pressed sandwiches, and I thought that was really bizarre. And maybe they were just trying to be helpful without really knowing.
They were all there on that one glorious day in Free Play Richardson and thought it was Arlington.
I think, but one of the shout outs to the food products that are
all
on
locations.
Burger Time is on all locations, is the fatality from that Mortal Kombat event, where I think it was buffalo sauce on a pizza, and then I got the what was this? I got the ghost peppers.
Oh, nice.
That you could sprinkle on top, and that was the. So yeah,
we had a lot of fun with those ghost peppers before we ran out of them.
Yeah, seriously, I used them like 16 times because we just kept. I was like, let's throw ghost peppers on it.
Ghost pepper challenge.
Right.
Everyone eating handfuls.
And we did but that was just one day only. We had a buffalo sauce with ghost peppers fatality for Mortal Kombat. Speaking of which, that was a really cool event, and
it was the blood-filled pinata. I got a message about that just this week.
Candy blood-filled.
Yeah, it was candy blood and a bunch of red stuff. Just it was all the red candies you could find, including
there were actual little bags of candy blood inside the pinata with all sorts of red candies.
Because I was actually thinking about more events that I wanted to do, because we had a couple different anniversary events this year, but I was like, man, that Mortal Kombat event was so cool.
Do you know how many pizzas we sold during that event?
I don't know.
With the ghost peppers?
Probably like 10 or something.
It wasn't very many,
10,
but
12, I don't know.
Hey, I had one.
But yeah, but that is of course the employee favorite, and so every time I'm over there, they're like, "Hey, can we get some more ghost pepper flakes?" I'm like, "It's not on the menu." They're like, "No, it's okay."
We could probably do an entire podcast just based around creative employee food options that our employees have come up with, things that they can make from stuff on our menu.
What we found by having every shift you work, if you're in one of the restaurants, you get a shift meal. It turns out that people love the food, but also start getting really creative as time goes on. Because now I'm not actually that way. Well, actually, that's just because I'm the CEO. And
so you made the menu.
I'm testing it every single time, and going off menu doesn't really help that. But no,
I've done both.
I mean, we've had a lot of fun with the food. It's definitely. At first, we weren't really sure what we were going to do, what we were going to think, but we knew we needed it because we wanted to serve alcohol.
Well, we had no idea how it was going to be received, and we were very happy that it was received very well. Different, but generally well received across the board.
So here's an interesting question that has come up, and I think it's kind of interesting given where the gaming world is right now. Someone wanted to know, like, if it was really appropriate that we called some of our events esports events. Because I guess there's this perception that, like, esports is mainly internet type stuff, which I don't think is quite accurate because, LAN parties and stuff and the stuff I used to do in the early 2000s, I think we still called them esports, even though there was no internet involved. I thought that meant electronic sports. So I don't know. It's kind of interesting. And then they kind of wanted to know generally where we saw ourselves in the grand paradigm of esports in the world. What if retro esports is? Are we using esports just as a buzzword or what? What do you think? What do you think, Chris?
I don't know because what does esports mean to me? It's a pretty generic term to me.
Right.
It's just throw I in front of something, right? Charge $600, but like, I've been traveling the country. I've done this several times in my life. I used to travel the country playing Tekken. Before then, I was competing in things like the Blockbuster World Championships. These were competitions based around video games. In my mind, they are what esports is.
Right.
I think there's an implied a lot of money involved in esports.
At least right now, yeah.
Yeah, as big sports franchises invest, modern sports franchises like football and basketball and baseball invest heavily in esports. So I think there's that connotation of like big corporate money with esports right now, and in some ways it's creating a backlash. I know I heard during the foils of Canada Cup, people decrying them joining up with an esports outfit to do their event, that this year's Canada Cup, and pointing directly to fighting game events not working well with esports events, whatever the difference may be, right?
Well, yeah, and the FGC for the entire United States has always had a kind of a weird, uneasy relationship with the term esports, which I think is kind of silly because esports, like if you go into like the kind of different categories within esports, you've got all these team games, but I feel like fighting games have a very good strong place in that 1v1 type world,
and they can even be played in team format if you so desire.
But yeah, I think it's kind of interesting to exist in this world where there is you've got like the international playing Dota, that tournament that has whatever, a crowdsourced $15 million prize pool.
They have my ultimate respect, which is for community sourcing all of that.
Well, it's really, really amazing, and of course the publisher is happy to facilitate and get that prize pool as high as possible. And you see stuff like that, and you think that esports has to be around forever. But of course, we've seen the rise in the late '90s, early 2000s, only to have it all pull back dramatically when profitability was unable to be discovered. So when some people have talked to me about kind of like what we're doing in terms of esports or whatever, the truth is I as a person want to watch and find the best players of these old games.
I think it helps us in what we do at Free Play Arcade. I know there's been so many people come into Free Play Arcade over the last year because of an experience they had in March.
Yeah.
They come back week in, week out. They're going to be there tomorrow in mass. And part of that is just like the investment that we made into a big event where quality players were flown in, and that experience of being on ground zero and all of that, leads to people coming in again and again and again, which makes it in some way profitable to us, but not, necessarily the big to do and not trying to compete with the international or whatever Dota is throwing out there.
I feel like one of the things that free play has always been, focused on is bringing the stuff that we like back in a sustainable way. So everything we do, that's one of the big considerations is is this sustainable? Is this smart for free play? And I think what's really interesting is despite having that, we've been able to, through sponsors and through us, bring together prize pools for games that have never existed before and at that level. For example, this spring, we will have what I assume is the highest prize pool for a Super Turbo tournament in history.
I'm sure it will be.
I mean, I think the last one was, so I'm pretty sure this one
was. Capcom decided to beat it by 1,000.
Oh, yeah, you're right. So,
and until Capcom decides to beat it yet again.
Yeah. So, and you see esports around, and major esports companies acting in a way that they're very internet bubble-ish. They're just assuming they'll figure out profits later. And just this last couple of months, we've seen a ton of rollbacks on these organizations, which isn't good because we're talking about people losing their jobs. And primarily, I think, because the organizations didn't focus on figuring out how to actually make money with it, how to keep it sustainable, keep it growing, and instead just assumed there would be these baked in audiences. And a lot of it is like a slow burn, and you just have to accept that. Like when we first ran our first Super Turbo tournament, and we put $1,000 prize pool on our spring series Super Turbo tournament. That was our big one. I thought, that was it. We'll have every major player in the country come because they know it's going to be the biggest and it's taken till probably maybe last spring series, but probably right now to really have everyone in the country understand that this is where you should come play Street Fighter. And so we have these organizations that just assume they'll be able to fill arenas somehow.
I think that there's a lot of interesting takes on this because Super Turbo clearly has been around for a very long time and has a community that can be built around it because it has the staying power. My real thing with a lot of esports is that the games change so fast. And sometimes it's not just the game, it's the version. Mm-hmm. And so you can build an audience, you can build a group of top level players playing a certain game, but then a new game's released and the audience moves on. And I think that a lot of these companies, they're realizing that the audience is not just going to come to watch whatever the game is because they're all new and they don't know what games have that staying power. I think that's the advantage of what we do, is that we're working with things that are tested products. I mean, some of them did well in their time and some of them we're building a resurgence and we're curating which games we think are good and introducing them to other players and trying to get them more involved with. And I just think that that's a big difference between the kinds of things that we see in the modern esports world versus what we're doing. Whether I would consider what we're doing esports, absolutely. I mean, it's just a generic terminology. Right. Anything that you could consider electronic sports.
Well, and I mean, It's weird because whatever you call it, it is what it is. And I feel like it's really important for free play to be the leader in retro stuff, retro playing video games, especially undoubtedly arcades is what I'm generally talking about. But I think the reason I think that's important is because the players that will come to play at these events expect the best. And so if we're giving these players what they expect and what they need to play the game at a high level, that means we're giving every single one of our players that happens to stop by top level equipment to play these games the best way they're meant to be played. And that's one of the biggest learning. I knew how retro 80s games worked when we started free play. I knew that Tron had to have its joystick, Burger Time had to have the right stuff, all these different games had to have certain things, and I knew no emulation, all that stuff. But fighting games, for example, and race and driving games, there have been a lot of lessons in terms of that, and we've slowly evolved based on our homegrown fighting game community, so that we now have anyone can walk into Free Play Arlington right now and play Super Turbo on an imported Versus City cabinet with all Sanwa buttons that are all ultra maintained. A couple of them are custom modified to work perfectly in this environment, and just play really, really great. And without our community and without the esports stuff that we do, whatever you want to call it, we would have never gotten to that point. We would have never gotten to that point, and we would have never been delivering our customers the best possible products.
Yeah, I don't even think Super Turbo hit the floor until a week before that initial $1,000 Spring Series event, because you had Hyper Fighting out there, the third iteration of Street Fighter 2.
So yeah, we started out with Hyper Fighting and X-Men vs. Street Fighter.
Yeah,
were our first two Street Fighter fighting games. Because I mean, Hyper Fighting was the one, because at first we weren't really sure what kind of arcade we were going to be.
It's always one of those two is pointed to as the classic.
And then we went to Super Turbo, and it's been a slow evolution. But by promising the best to the players, we now have serious players who want to come in and maybe stream or do stuff on all sorts of stuff, shmups, you name it. I mean, old games, and so making sure that we have the best. I mean, it was kind of interesting because
stream a shmup.
Right.
If you got some sweet
Cyvarius or something,
some sweet shmup skills, send me a message. Game has to be in the arcade currently.
Right. Well, and I mean, hit us up. We have a big backlog too of shmups because we're slowly rotating them, and we don't always work as fast as some people would like, but we are always evolving to be the best. And
I'll pass on the Space Invaders world record.
Nice.
Pass. Hard pass.
But I think that's kind of the thing is, we're always working to get better, and our esports and our communities that have evolved around these video games and in a competitive format, streamed and all of that, make sure that we have the best. And it has really, I think, brought our product to a whole other level. So I don't know if we're esports. That's just a label, but I do know that the competitive scene helps our underlying product. And the reason we're investing in the competitive scene, because for example, during the Spring Series, we're going to give away way more money than we bring in. And that's the nature of the beast. And we're going to work with sponsors. And
the name of the beast is Corey.
Right. But it's very, very important to have something growing in a nice, sustainable way. And the focus and the hope in doing that is that the players will play at Free Play, learn that we have the best stuff, and keep coming back, which I think is actually what has happened. Mm-hmm. Because we want to make sure we're delivering the best product, and we definitely don't want inferior products out there being the ones that are played. So I don't know. What do y'all think? Think we've answered that question?
I think we've answered that.
I think we're good.
All right, cool. So that basically wraps up this multi-question. We've kind of gone all over this podcast, talked about a lot of different stuff. So keep sending in your questions. We always find interesting. You can send in tech requests, but just know it could be like 6 months or never before we get them on the podcast.
Go to the bar at the Free Play you're at. There's a comment card. Put it in there. We absolutely pay attention to them.
Or just talk to one of the bar staff and they'll happily do it for you.
Right. And I will also, maybe one of the podcasts in the future will do a quick fire diagnostics thing where people send in their questions and I'll just tell them what I think is broken.
Nice.
Over and over and over. But
that'll have to be a live stream.
Right.
We'll do that on Twitch.
Send in your questions and we'll do it, because I think that would be interesting, and I
watch Corey slowly deteriorate.
Well,
watch the life force leave him.
It's it is something that I think is really fun to do and important. But I generally do it just at Free Play and slowly lose my mind there, not on the internet. So in the meantime, we will be back to you soon. This has been the Free Play Arcade podcast, brought to you by Jaden Smith himself.
Thanks for the coffee.